Greetings, my fellow freedom loving sovereign thinkers. This is L3's News Podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful Swampy Mangroves of South Florida. And today's date is Tuesday, March 4th, 2019. So let us begin. Thanks for tuning in, my friends. Just in my camper in the heart of downtown Fort Lauderdale. Woo, yeah, just itching to do another episode. However, just going to do a couple topics. One about Representative Ilhan Omar, which they have a witch hunting fetish towards. And, of course, the Green New Deal. With Alexandria Cortez knows best. I can't even wipe my own rear end, but I'm going to tell you how to live. You know how these politicians are. It's like dumb, dumber, and the dumbest. Yippee, yappy, and yahooey, and all that walks of life. Well, it'll be interesting here. I'm going to be talking about Ilhan Omar, representative from Minnesota, Democrat. And to be very frank, some of the stuff she was addressing in reference to Elliott Abrams and criticizing Zionism, I think that's pretty damn good. Pretty damn good, I would say. Doesn't matter what you agree with her or not on everything, which I don't. Just to make that very clear. And don't have to worry about being a Muslim Islamophobia or anything like that. It's all irrelevant. Because at the time I was like checking out someone made a complaint about Representative Omar about Elliott Abrams. And what's funny, if you really look at his Elliott Abrams achievements, he is a war criminal, a warmonger, a neocon, and a bend of a bob to the New World Order. That includes being a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. So that's acceptable? I don't think so. We don't need any more neocons. I'm tired of imperialism. And if these rhetorical cowards want to go to fight, attack other countries, go on the front line and see how tough these clowns are. That includes Elliott Abrams. Yes, I am real critical of the man. They even claim he's another Zionist pig as well. It doesn't mean I hate Jews. Alright, that's totally different, my friends. I call individuals like him a gyno, a Jew in name only. There's a bunch of them out there in politics. Whether it's in federal, state, or local, all you gotta do is examine what they stand for. And they claim to be Judaic, which they're not. They're frauds. As we call it, gyno, a Jew in name only. No, I'm digressing. But that's okay. So, this caught my attention from the Gion Journal and by Teros Fakri. Hopefully I pronounced his name correctly. He's from Ethiopia, by the way, but I admire his work and his team as well. This one here says, the Zionist Caucus's political lynching of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar came out today. A public lynching was as much a campaign of mass terror as it was an act of murder. Slaves, who I rightly refer as capital prisoners, were brutally and systematically coerced into subjugation by despicable racists who saw nothing wrong with trading humans as chattel as they profited from America's Holocaust. Each time a man, woman, or child was lynched, it was a message to their community to stay in their lanes or end up dangling from branches. We are no longer in the age of in-your-face persecution. Racism morphed from explicit acts of oppression to more implicit deeds of exclusion. And it's pretty good because it has merit on that, a lot of historical facts. Remember, even during the time, a lot of certain states, even from the Mid-Atlantic northern states as well, if you were like black American, doesn't matter if you're a slave or free, you are not allowed to own firearms. Yeah, that's called enslavement, my friends. And many of these politicians who support red flag laws are wannabe slave masters. But I will continue on here. Once in a while, Americans are shocked by a blatant act of bigotry, but mostly vicious of undercurrents of racism that critters the lives of millions have become superstitious to the point of near invisibility. The lashes have morphed into taxes and inflation, debt the new slave ship that endangers the massive into permanent financial uncertainties. That's right, technocracy, central banking, a la the Federal Reserve. The shackles transform into government assistance programs where politicians implement policies that transfer wealth upward and then give it back to pennies on the dollar. Though too many Americans are blinded to pernicious ways, both parties conclude to enact these onerous policies that affect not only black folk, but the vast majority of Americans. The truth is that the trochea of D.C., Manhattan, and Hollywood are wholly owned subsidiary of moneyed interests. Lost among the merry-go-round personalities that enter and exit politics is the fact that Democrats and Republicans, along with the media political complex as a whole, are under the direct control of Wall Street. Powerful lobbying groups and the oligarchy who control them, many of them who are foreign nationals. In politics, telling lies is rewarded with re-elections and an embrace of the establishment, but daring to utter the truth is returned with an avalanche of bad press and howls of feigned outrage. This is how politicians are kept in check, toe the company line, and officials are kissed by fame and showered with riches. Make the mistake of deviating from scripts, and politicians are drummed out of D.C. as innocuous and malicious aspersions come flying at them like arrows in the opening scene of the movie Gladiator. Cynthia McKinney is a prime example of what happened when a politician dares to speak the truth into the halls of power. However, what's happening to Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is an egregious act of political intimidation compared to the standard act of coercion that is part for the course of our nation's capital. For the second time in less than a month, Omar is being targeted by Zionists in our government and their loyal servants because she had the temerity to speak her mind. This should be a wake-up call to every African American who reflexively votes for the party that Malcolm X rightly described as foxes who smile at you only to eat you. And there's a little tweet from Representative Juanito Vargas. It is disturbing that Representative Omar continues to perpetuate hurtful anti-Semitic stereotypes that misrepresent our Jewish community. Additionally, questioning support for the U.S.-Israel relations is unacceptable. So, if they say bend over, Representative Vargas, you go, how far, please? May I have more in my rear end? I'm more gratified to worship you than serve my people. I'll continue on here. Let me clarify a few things before I dispense with the necessities and get down to brass tacks. First, I entitled this article with full intention. It is not meant to draw you in, nor am I needlessly incite emotions. My aim is not to diminish the horrific legacy of slavery and systemic ways the descendants of survivors were singled out for repression. Yet I cannot still my tongue and watch a young woman, first-generation immigrant from Somalia, who represents the quintessential American story, being ripped apart by racists in order to drive her out of power and to intimidate anyone who dares to follow her lead in speaking the truth to power. The sin that Omar committed, for which she is about to be politically lynched tomorrow by a bipartisan chorus of bigots, are twofold. Yeah, that includes people like Dumb Down David Watson Show saying Representative Ted Deutsch. Ginos. I know I'm being exaggerate right now, folks, but I will continue on here. 3 weeks ago, Omar insinuated that the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, one of the most powerful lobbying organizations in the world, used their money to influence politicians. For this act of fact speaking, Omar was bludgeoned by an army of duplicitous operative across the political spectrum as an anti-Semite. So if you go after Palestinians, that's not being anti-Semitic? Of course not. Because, you gotta be Jewish to be, if you hate Jews, you're anti-Semitic. But if you're a John, you're anti-Semitic. Give me a break. And I'll continue on here. When it comes to craft and lobbying, few have as much as cash and influence as AIPAC. What Omar said was more anti-Semitic than if I said that Italian restaurants are good pasta makers. Her second act of a divisionist form acceptable speech happened over this weekend when Omar noted that pro-Israel advocates have an allegiance to a foreign country. Unless I fell asleep during a geographic class that Israel is the 51st state in our union that I never knew about, politicians who time and again vote blindly in support of Israel to the point of hurting the American national interests are in fact showing the allegiance to a foreign country. Yeah, stop using those knee pads, babies. That's right. Stop using those knee pads and blowing them. All right? They don't give a damn about you. That's the truth, folks. I will proceed here. American is seen as an unreliable broker of peace between Israel and Palestine for this reason. The bipartisan Zionist Caucus has a stranglehold on the Middle East policy, making decisions. Intent on proving Omar right, the person who is leading the smear charge is none other than Uber-Zionist Congressman Eliot Engel. When it comes to fidelity to Israel, Congressman Engel mount on the Mount Rushmore of AIPAC. According on the issues, Engel has 100% commitment to Israel. Full and unbreakable commitment is a trait of enablers, non-elected officials who are supposed to represent our interests. Engel's office plaques read that he is a representative of New York 16th Congressional District. In reality, he's a member of the Israel's Knesset, working part-time for our government. The sad reality is that Engel is not the outlier. He is in the norm in government that has been thoroughly hijacked by powerful interests. Can we say John Jay is rolling in his grave? I recommend you folks read Phillips Papers 2 through 5. Have you noticed that I have yet to use the word Jewish in this article? That is because Zionism has nothing to do with Judaism. Zionism is to Jews as the Ku Klux Klan is to Christians. There is a reason why AIPAC and the Zionist lackeys in government go out of their way to silence critics. They do not want a public conversation about the roots and the foundation of Zionism because tenets of Zionism are grounded in ethnic supremacy. After Theodore Herzl appropriated the history of Hebrews in the 19th century, Zionism metastasized like a cancer by weaponizing identity politics and blood-going, bulging anyone who exposed their brand of bigotry as anti-Semitic. It's a good site to go to, folks. JewsAgainstZionism.com. There's a big difference. My fellow Christians would do well to follow the lead of a lot of Jews in their repudiation of Zionists. Though I try my hardest to keep my faith between me and God, in this instance, I have moved to speak up. People who read the Bible should flip open the book and read Revelation chapter 3, verse 9. I will say 2 verse 9 as well, folks. Trust me on that. Which is actually represents the fake Jews that are considered synagogues of Satan. The political state of Israel is not the same thing as the biblical Israel. Do not let wolves dressed as sheep fool you. God's chosen people had nothing to do with a special class of humans. A chosen people is a parable of people that are chosen to endure much suffering so they can redeem people with their compassion. Bulldozing a mother's home in Gaza and shooting unarmed Palestinian children is not an act of compassion. It's an act that the Gestapo would be proud of. Where Congresswoman Omar tibetly noted that some politicians are in the pockets of an overseas government or to be crucified and politically lynched tomorrow. I will pick where she left off and finish her thoughts. My fellow Americans, our country has in fact been commandeered by foreign powers. Except this power is not one of the group but many. Zionists, the Vatican, Wahhabists, and extremists within every religion and institution of power, including central banks and neo-atrocity are concluding to run this world with impunity while the rest of humanity suffers for it. This is a new world order comprised of godless globalists. The rest of humanity are the chattel as they induce us into tribalism to distract us from their malice. We don't have sovereignty in America. Our government is no longer responsive to our interests. Politicians don't pay attention to their constituents' concerns, and the media political complex as a whole exists to medicate us into compliance. If you need any proof how far the establishment has strayed into a psychotic level of subservience, one of the linchpins of the globalists, watch tomorrow's public lynching of Congresswoman Omar, and why they bash her for speaking her mind, and you will quickly realize that we have become a republic in the name only and a corporate totalitarian state by practice. Interesting about that, I'm glad he brought that up, because the truth of the matter is, folks, if you read Title 28, Section 3002, subsection 15, it does state that the United States of America is a federal corporation. And now we'll continue on here. Louder than the cacophony of dissemblers who rush the microphone to throw torpedoes at Omar tomorrow is the silence of Alexandria Cortez, Kennedy, Bernie Sanders, and these spineless progressives who use the pains of the marginalized to get ahead, only to stick shivs in our backs the minute they get elected. I don't know what it's going to take to get a critical mass of people to stop being conditioned by politics the same way Pavlov's dog was trained by chimes. For those who think that voting in a new wave of personality to secure the Ebola, that is our political system, is the answer, tomorrow promises to mug some of the cognitive dissonance, failing our ability to disavow both parties and demand a government that works for us. It seems only chance we have a huge change is those with access to power to stand against the powerful. Yesterday I reposted an article and also added a special segment of Seek Truth TV, where I spoke against the absurdity of blaming all for the sins of a few. Let me reiterate for those who might want to use my words to advance their own agenda. My condemnation of Zionists should not be conflated as an attack against Jews. As an Ethiopian, in my veins course the blood of Semites who trace their lineage back to Queen Sheba and King Solomon. I no more hate Jewish people than I hate Ethiopia, or any people for that matter. As Elie Wiesel once noted, collective judgment is evil. A sin of a few should never be ascribed to the whole of that group. And he's absolutely correct, folks. And I said, however, the same way we can't assign collective judgment, neither should we be afraid to speak up against a few because they happen to belong to a group that has maligned for ages. We cannot let powerful people use the suffering of marginalized groups as human shields. We must speak up when we see evil wherever it is and whomever is being practiced against. While Democrats and Republicans line up tomorrow to censure Omar, a bipartisan group of senators and representatives led by Glambour Marco Rubio and Pinocchio Chuck Schumer are working to outlaw political speech. Well, piss on these quacks, okay? By targeting anyone who dares to speak, to take part of the boycott, divest, and sanctions, or BDS movement. Sorry, chumps. With all due respect and in good faith, the First Amendment supersedes your acidine rhetoric. Not only is our government not responsive to us, the supposed free press that is supposed to check the powers of federalism has been inverted by the same cash influence of globalists and multinational corporations to point where William Randolph Hearst and the yellow journalism he perfected look like scions of truth by comparison. The same way politicians are going after Omar with the sledgehammer, corporate journalists and opinion leaders are viciously targeting independent journalists in order to stifle dissent and silence people who speak against media narratives. We have literally become the United Stasi of America, where when we stand by and let our government outlaw groups and persecute individuals, even those we don't like. Be careful. The path will be open through compliance will boomerang and land at our homes. A little quote here about Ian, Minnesota. Because first they come after Omar. We remain silent at our own risk. The next time they'll be knocking at our doors. When we do, who will speak for us? Hashtag political lynching. Whatever men and women are persecuted because of their race, religion, or political views, that place must, at the moment, become the center of the universe. That's from a quote from Elie Wiesel. And that is it, to be very frank. The section below is a summary of the article we're able to print out. If you want to know, restart this initiative. Okay. It's very good. So I gotta agree with Mr. Furque. Hopefully I pronounced his name correctly. Can't argue with that at all, my friends. Free speech is more important than your feelings. If you don't like it, get the hell out of the United States of America. Go contaminate somewhere else. That includes all these little giant-infested sympathizers in Congress. I'm sick of their garbage as well. Doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. I was very consistent towards these two clowns, Rubio and Schumer, for a long time. I didn't follow their hype. I didn't follow their BS. Why? Because I see right through them. And this gentleman here as well. I don't know, we're not the only ones. So this is why, my friends, you want to fight. If you want to fight the truth, fight the real war on terror, you gotta defend our U.S. Bill of Rights culture. Period. No exceptions. If you want to compromise or you want to devalue it, then you are less patriotic than Benedict Arnold. Prove me wrong if you dare. And remember, witch hunting is for cowards. I just can't wait to hear the censure stuff. I'm just waiting for Ted Deutsch to speak. So I'm going to have to call his ass up and go, how does it feel being a tyrannical Uncle Tom? All right. Got one more here, folks. Came out like yesterday. I would say, yeah. Seen it recently. It goes, Civil War would erupt if Green Deal socialists actually get what they want. It's by Brandon Smith. In the months preceding the 2016 presidential election, I predicted Trump election win, but try to temper explanations with the reality that there were multiple scenarios exploitable by globalists which can turn the conservative election to confusion and chaos. Just after the election, I published an article titled Order Out of Chaos and Defeat of the Left with the Cost. In that article, I warned that the political left, when confronted with failure, has displayed a habit of doubling or tripling down and becoming even more extreme in their rhetoric and policies. I also warned that this might influence the political right to become more extreme in response. This is the problem when attempting to explain the false left-right paradigm to people who are new to the concept. Yes, at the top of the political pyramid, all of the players support essentially the same policies of centralization and more power to the elites. But at the bottom of the pyramid, there are numerous and legitimate divides among common citizens. The divides are real, not false, and it's these divides that the elite seek to exploit. One divide that we are likely to hear much more about in the next 2 years is that divide between old school Democrats and the new Green Deal socialist communists. Another more vitriolic divide is one of the between common sense conservatives and the double down socialist cult. The narrative being constructed here is a fascinating but disturbing one, considering the pattern of display. Sovereignty activists unseat the old Republican Guard and take control of the party through Trump during the 2016 election while pushing populism to the forefront of the mainstream. They supplant the social justice left who thought they had the world in the palm of their hand. In a response, the left goes even more insane, searching for meaning in a world that obviously does not want them. They come to the realization that not only did they run the worst possible candidate in 2016, Clinton, but their platform was not extreme enough. They now plan not to only take down Trump by any means necessary, but they also explain to break down their own old guard and rebuild the Democratic Party into something openly communist rather than closet communist. Of course, this narrative is not really Trump didn't push out the old guard neocon Republicans. In fact, the elites run his administration today through globalist agents like Bolton, Pompeo, Ross, and Mnuchin. The Trump administration, while perhaps rebellious in its rhetoric, has done nothing to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. The left is rebelling against a fantasy. There is no populist takeover of the U.S. government. There are no champions for liberty, free markets, and individual sovereignty in the White House. Is this all con game? But who benefits the con? I support the leftists will find themselves in a similar position as liberty conservatives now down the road as a Green New Deal is forced into the mainstream consciousness. With socialists like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez receiving more public and media attention than ever, it is clear that there is an agenda by the establishment to generate manufactured excitement over socialist communist policies. To be clear, the way our system operates today is already quite socialist, with big government interference in almost every aspect of business and life. However, the Green New Deal represents a full-blown Marxist approach to government control. It is essential Soviet-level communism repackaged as environmental socialism. The political left is more vulnerable than ever to this kind of transition. As noted above, they feel they lost the 2016 election because they ran an establishment candidate on policies that they were not extreme enough. But they do campaign in 2020 on a socialist communist platform. It will be the same old elitist establishment that benefits. The old guard will become the new guard, just as the old guard became the new guard when Trump entered office. I will try to break the situation down as clearly as I can. Globalist patterns tend to repeat. They use the same strategies over and over again. Because these strategies have worked for them in the past, as I noted in my article, Trump Trade Wars, a perfect smokescreen for a market crash, Trump's presidency strangely echoes that of Herbert Hoover's. Almost every Trump policy, from large corporate tax cuts to infrastructure spending programs to aggressive trade tariffs, is reminiscent to Hoover's presidency just before the onset of the Great Depression. Also, the Federal Reserve was raising interest rates into economic weakness during Hoover's presidency, just as they were doing during Trump's presidency. Hoover was a one-term president unseated by economic collapse. He was then replaced by perhaps the most openly communistic leader the U.S. has ever had, Franklin D. Roosevelt. Roosevelt's New Deal was a catalyst for most big government socialist programs for decades to come. I don't think it's a coincidence that Trump's presidency closely matches Hoover's. I don't think it is a coincidence that the Federal Reserve is tightening policy into weakness today, cutting $65 billion in assets from the balance sheet in February alone, just as they did during Hoover's term. I don't think this is a coincidence that the U.S. is currently suffering a vast economic turndown in fundamental data in housing markets, auto markets, credit markets, manufacturing, and retail. And I don't think it's a coincidence as we enter the third year of Trump's first and perhaps last term, the extreme left suddenly proposed a highly socialist New Deal program from left field. The pattern is rather familiar. Some people might argue that a Green New Deal is a sideshow and that the American people will never support such measures of any presidential candidates that would implement them. And I would agree if we're to hold an election today. After all, front Muppet Cortez comes off like an angry teenager who just discovered Marx and Alinsky and decided to base her entire identity around the cliff notes of their books. But by 2020, the story may be much different. If a globalist scheme is, as have I been predicting, as they plan to bring down the U.S. economy into recession depression territory under Trump's watch, then the ensuing public fear could develop into support for measures citizens might have originally thought absurd. Trump will likely be voted out if the Democratic candidate is a full-blown socialist. During a recent testimony of Michael Cohen, Trump's former lawyer suggested in a rather odd exchange with Congress that if Trump were to lose the election in 2020, that the transition will never be peaceful. The leftist media has already pounced in his comments that asserted that conservatives would support Trump in a kind of violent retroactive coup should the Dems win the next election. Generally, I find the expositions of the leftists in the media so delusional it is painful. Their vision is so clouded by bias and fantasy that many of them could be mistaken for institutionalized schizophrenics. They see racists and fascists under every rock and behind every tree, and they justify their insanity by creating enemies that simply do not exist. That said, in this case, I actually agree with their assessment. If the left runs a new Green Deal platform and wins in 2020, conservatives were likely to revolt violently, and even though that the elitist establishment would seek to ultimately benefit from a civil war in the U.S., and even though I know that Trump is a Pied Piper for the globalists, I could not admonish such a rebellion. The Green New Deal would be so devastating to the U.S. economy that it could only result in complete destabilization, eventually mass extermination. The consequences of its policies need to be examined more thoroughly, not just by conservatives, but people on the left who have not yet fallen off the fence into extremism. The agenda is frightening. Government support of nonprofits to manage local economies. Green Deal proponents pretend as they will fight for more localized economies, but their brand support is aimed at cooperation between nonprofits and government. Nonprofits are some of the most corrupt organizations active in the U.S. Also, while giving government incentives to promote localism does not sound like a bad idea, government should not be involved in economic management at all. How far will the government go to ensure that local economies are given priority? What if incentives are not enough and regulation follows as it usually does? Enforcing localism is like enforcing charity. If localism is enforced, it is not localism. It must be voluntary. So it's more of a conscription thing when you look at it. 100% clean energy by 2030. It's interesting that this policy matches exactly with the UN's sustainability agenda for 2013. First and foremost, there is no concrete evidence whatsoever that carbon causes global warming or climate change, and certainly no evidence that man-made carbon affects the environment. But the UN sustainability plans hinge on the idea of carbon pollution and taxation, and so does the new Green Deal. What stated cost of $13.4 trillion to convert to 100% renewable energy, an extreme low estimate, the money to pay for everything has to come from somewhere. A la the Federal Reserve, right? Exactly. The funds will come from the average consumer and fuel taxation, taxes high enough to make driving a gas vehicle prohibitive over time. And of course, carbon taxation of what is left of the U.S. manufacturing and industry, leaving the U.S. completely non-competitive in global trade. This portion of the new Green Deal would essentially sink the U.S. into third world status. Full employment program. We've seen the results of full employment policies in communist countries in the past, and they generally do not work out too well for the average person. The only way to implement such standards is through forced wealth redistribution and much lower wages, meaning once again American living standards will have to be sharply decreased. The only way that a vast majority of average Americans will support these vast changes to our culture and our economic system is if we already in the midst of a financial disaster and we feel we have nothing to lose. The economic decay currently initiated by the Fed through their deliberate implosion of the everything bubble they created over the past decade indicates that this may very well be the case by 2020. Even so, millions of conservatives will not accept the institution of these measures, along with the host of other predictable policies socialists would implement, from gun control to increased taxation in every area of life. The only outcome I see in this scenario would be civil war. The danger is that if this occurs, the globalists may control both sides through puppet leadership, which means they control who wins and who loses. And Mr. Smith is right on that. And this is why you gotta look at the 10th Amendment, my friends. Nullification is a beautiful remedy. The one thing we know too, you're gonna use the Edward Bernays' propaganda playbook as well. You have to always look at these scenarios. These do your homework in these areas. I did a show on about the New Green Deal Debunked, which is mainly from the Mises Institute, and they had a lot of merit behind that. So you gotta tell the children this. They're trying to follow this mentality about the New Green Deal and try to convince people in Congress on this, which is completely irrelevant. It reminds me of the children of Khmer Rouge, and I say that out of respect. It's not really that sanitary. That'll be the word to use. So the New Green Deal is nothing more but a monumental lie. And this thing with Congresswoman Omar is just witch hunting. And I'm not going to agree with this woman's views, her politics, or anything like that. But I will give her admiration on calling out things. And we need more of that in Congress, even on a state and local level too. There's too many folks out there are sucking up to these entities, these institutions, which is unacceptable and anti-American, regardless of your race, color, creed, gender, etc. All right, folks, that is it. I thank everyone for listening. Plus, feel free to download and share this information or episodes throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or you send something that's interesting to me I want to check out, whatever you do, please address your correspondence with decorum. I will leave all my information, my social media sites, and email addresses on my Spreaker page, okay? All right, my friends, once again, thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that demoniac resistance is something for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves, keep on spreading love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.